we'll provide them a recorded copy of it, of a sanitary easement, which allows for our sanitary needs to be provided with access through 3426 Springbrook. And I've got the parcel number and the legal all identified in the document. But because we were able to access the sanitary issue through that adjacent parcel, that obviates the need for the variance, which would be necessary only because we wouldn't meet the requirements for the minimum width on the front in a situation where there was both no water and no sewer. This is now just a situation where we should be able to address the issues through the building department and proceed without the need for a variance. So we are willing to withdraw our request if it is verified and vetted appropriately for you all. And am I misstating anything, Mr. Power? Is that accurate?
Okay, before we go any further, I want to have somebody make a motion to open the hearing. Okay. Pat, supported by Tom. All in favor of opening the hearing? Aye. Opposed, same sign. Hearing is open. Anything you'd like to add, Dan?
Sure. So yeah, that was a good introduction. This is a case where I've been getting some new information as we've been proceeding here, and we like to usually have a format that we follow and respect sort of the format of how this case was notified to neighboring residents and give some of the background of the case. So typically we'd have variance requests like this where we review some of the findings of fact related to 4 variance criteria that have to be reviewed and potentially considered for approval before a variance is granted. In this case, there's some new information, including the pursuit of a formal recorded easement to get a sanitary line installed that would actually allow for the sanitary connection, and then that kicks you back to allowing the lot to be effectively built on with the lower conventional standards. So that kind of gives you some high-level summary. If you don't mind, I would like to go through some background slides, and
Sure.
I would still encourage you, even with the request to withdraw, to offer the opportunity for some public comment. 'Cause
Yes.
we do have some
I'll get to that when
folks
you're
here.
done. Yeah,
Yeah,
yep,
so-
okay, you bet.
All right, so I'll give some background of the case, and I apologize, the pictures of the site are a little grainy. I had to use a filter because this was on the way into work, and lo and behold, it's already dark 70% of the day now, so that's what the site looks like. We're adjacent to the corner of Green Ridge and Springbrook. There's a fairly conventional floor plan here. It looks like it's a sort of a dual level structure with a garage and a sort of a gathering room on the lower floor and then bedrooms on the upper level. This is what the layout of the site would look like. And this is sort of the lot in context with the surrounding plat. So you'll notice it's not an original plat lot, but it is compliant with current zoning standards if sanitary and water service are provided, or sanitary or water service are provided to the lot, which would allow building there. So the idea was, for a while, I think we were trying to catch up on the interpretation of that code and figure out to what extent public utilities are available here. That's why we got a little bit ahead of ourselves with notifying this as a variance request. But the point remains, if there's sanitary here, even if you're not looking at an original lot, if you have the minimum 90-foot width, quarter-acre lot size, that would check the box for basically for drinking water and sanitary sewage treatment. There are a fair number of other lots. This is just a graphic showing some of the lots in the area, comparable sizes in the same zoning district. So this lot is sort of on the smaller end, but if you go over to that Gage and Kingsbury subdivision, there are quite a few lots that are actually smaller than this one. There are a fair number of lots in the area also without public water service. As one example, the blue lines on here are public water, the orange lines are public sanitary sewer. And as you can see, this lot is in pretty close proximity to the end of a sanitary sewer line. So they've actually worked through getting the agreement to record an easement that would tie up to their property and allow them that sanitary access. So that being said, if there's public, the first thing our ordinance says is actually if there's public sewer provided for the property abutting an easement or right-of-way in which public sewer must be provided for property abutting an easement or water or right-of-way where public sewer is located. So right away, if public sewer is so located, which presumably this easement would allow public sewer to be located in an easement adjacent to this site, that checks the box for what's required essentially to build, at least with regard to public utility provisions. If there wasn't a way to get sanitary sewer there, they would have to have public water there, as was the case with the Gage site you saw earlier this year. There wasn't either utility, and then you go into the realm of, well, now I need a variance to even consider building there. That's not the case here if there is public sanitary sewer that's imminent. So if there is imminent public sanitary sewer, we have a few things to look at. And like I said, there's a recorded easement pending. I actually have information on the instrument number from the applicant. And what we're eventually looking for is the recorded easement and obviously the actual sanitary line to be used to connect to the building site. Then there's no need for a variance from the ZBA, and I'll talk about some of the procedural stuff that is tied to that for tonight's meeting. But just to be transparent and talk about some of the things that a lot of this is typical for new building anywhere, we might as well talk about it for this site as well. There's going to be some demolition involved. This site is peculiar because it's sort of a remnant of a past development with the golf course having been there. So there's some interesting grade. There had been a cistern on the site that needs removal and needs some checking of the soil integrity for that site to be built on. Looking at some of the private restrictions that may be tied to this plat, the city doesn't enforce those restrictions, but it's incumbent on the builder to adhere to those restrictions. Making sure that there's good site drainage, that there's a driveway and a side slope that are accessible to get to that house, which you saw is the building site is pretty mounded up right now. So there are certainly some benchmarks that need to be met to build on this lot. But this is just sort of tangential to what you folks are focusing in on, which is really just the issue of, is there a public utility available to this lot, which in this case is imminent. This slide is a lot of text, and that's, I think, because I got some analysis from the city attorney, and I sort of just copied some of that in there. But what I understand is that the ZBA should certainly still offer the opportunity for public comment, but hearing that there's a request to withdraw the application related to not tying into a public utility, then the ZBA can act on that motion to receive the oral withdrawal and adopt a motion based on that to essentially close out this case if the intent is to connect to sanitary sewer. So that's what the end result would be. I have a packet with some additional information, and that includes a motion sheet that you can use based on that request to withdraw. There's also some comments from one of the neighbors here with the address of 3464 Springbrook. There's also an updated site plan that was the same as what was on your slide. So that's in your update packet that's at your spot for tonight. But ultimately, I recommend that you go ahead and hear public comment, close the public hearing, and do the motion to receive and withdraw.
We need a motion to close the hearing.
I make a motion to close the hearing.
Close.
I think we're still open on the hearing if you want to take the public comment.
You want to take that on the open hearing?
Sure, I think that'd be good.
Withdraw it? Okay, thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, anyone care to speak to this variance? You got to step to the microphone. Name and address for the record, please.
I'm David Kane. Address is 3464 Springbrook. We're the lot right next to this lot. And we just got the plan tonight, and the only thing that I see on that is that the proposed well is very close to our property line. And one of the challenges that we've got is, of course, we've got a septic system, and any septic system at some point is doomed to failure. And so one of our interests is potentially, if we could get access to Grand Rapids Sewer, that's something that we're interested in. But the flip side also is that possibly if that proposed well were on the other side of the driveway, it would at least allow us to potentially, if we have to put a new field in, that would help us out.
Yeah, you'd have to be so many feet away, right? Is that what we're
That's
saying?
correct.
Yeah, okay. Okay, anyone else?
Thank you. My name is James Sturkin. My address is 3460 Bayberry Drive, Northwest here in Walker. I am a neighbor kind of just off the screen's picture there, but I also am an attorney and I do represent the neighborhood committee. And the only point that I would like is when we looked at the language of the statute a bit earlier, it did say that all properties abutting the easement. Now, I'm not sure of the meaning of that, actually, of abutting the easement. So if we consider the easement the property that will be served by this private easement that's been granted, does the Keynes property being right next door to that qualify as property abutting the easement? Frankly, I'm not sure whether it does or doesn't. However, if it does qualify as property abutting the easement, I think a variance would need to be considered. And that's really the only point I wanted to raise.
Dan?
Thought
on that?
And I think there's a couple things being asked there. So when the references to the Keynes property, I believe you're talking about the lot one to the north. The easement that's proposed is designed, and there's some comments from the city engineer in this packet as well that kind of dive deeper into the structure of this easement and how it came to be, that it was accepted by Grand Rapids and our engineering department. But the easement itself would cross this property, which is 3426 at the corner, and then it would abut the property in question. And the Keynes property is the 3464 lot here, which would be isolated from that easement. There's some separation there. There's another issue with regard to whether that property and properties to the north could tie into a special assessment district for a different sanitary line to come in. But for now, the only easement that has been accepted because of the kind of the unique situation of this lot is the one crossing the corner lot. So that would make this lot abutting that easement. It would not make this lot abutting that easement. And so if this lot abuts that easement, my understanding is that obligates that lot to connect to sanitary sewer, and I think that's the intent of the builder. If they turned around and said, we don't actually want to connect to that easement, we're placing over that property, then we'd have another issue on our hands, and there would need to be a variance request.
Okay. Anyone else?
Let me just say,
We have one more. We have one more yet, sir. We have one more yet.
I didn't see that.
I'm Victoria Kane. I'm Mr. Kane's wife. And I just wanted the committee to know that we called the city of Grand Rapids about obtaining an easement. And to be perfectly frank about it, we're a little frustrated because the city of Grand Rapids said, no, we're not going to allow you to piggyback onto the easement. And I said, well, is there an ordinance that prohibits that? No, there's not an ordinance. I said, okay, is it a matter of policy? No, it's not a matter of policy. It's just a case-by-case basis. And so we're concerned because we're very landlocked on our lot, and decisions are being made by our neighbors there on the corner in the city of Grand Rapids, they're kind of running, making decisions that impact the potential long-term value of our property. And I'd like to say for the record that Mr. Manley and Ms. Silverman, the new owners, are very nice people. We've met them. They're lovely, and they're coming into this without having knowledge of the unusual circumstances. So from our perspective, it feels a little bit as if our neighbors there on the corner are the ones that are driving the sanitary sewer decisions for the city of Walker at this point, given the city of Grand Rapids' absence of an ordinance or even a public or a policy as to who can hook into a sewer easement. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Hearing none? Okay, sir.
I'll just make one brief. I just wanted to confirm, again, I'm Dan Burns, and my office is at 220 Lyon in Grand Rapids. And I just wanted to confirm what we are intending to do is consistent with what Dan said, and we do intend to put the sewer line over and comply then with the building department's requirements.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now we can close the public hearing.
I make a motion to close the public.
All right,
hearing.
Rose, we'll take it this time. Here, support.
Support.
Support. We have a support to close the hearing. All in favor of closing the hearing, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. The hearing is closed. And now we'll have comment, I guess, on before we decide what we want to do with the motion, so. Anything else, Dan, at this time that we heard that we should know about, or your thought process on it? Now, who decides on the, okay, is that a Grand Rapids water system thing that decides this, or drives this, or what, that says yes or no, or?
Yeah, it's complicated. So we're right near the border of the North Kent Sewer District or Sewer Authority and the City of Grand Rapids Sewer Authority in this particular location. So we're near the northern extent of what Grand Rapids controls, and they control sanitary, public sanitary service and public water service to residents in Walker. And they, in collaboration with our engineering department, make a judgment with how and where the sanitary easements can be extended. What my very basic understanding, which is I think explained a lot better by Scott Connors in your report packet, and I'll refer you to page 9, I think. There's some comments from the city engineer, maybe page 11. Page 11, there it is. But there's typically not an ability to have easement that cuts across the frontage of a lot. You typically want to extend the main to serve the additional properties in the right of way. So that's where I think there's some interpretation that's had based on proximity and how everything lays out that Grand Rapids and our engineering department ultimately have some purview over.
Okay.
If the sewer is run across this easement, it's gonna go back to that main at the intersection, it's not gonna connect to the existing line to the house on the corner.
I believe that's right. The applicant may note, so they're nodding their head. I think that's right.
And in the event that this plat gets future sewer and water, will that easement go away and then this new property be attached to the main at that point, or will that easement remain there?
That's a good question, and I don't have 100% certainty, but I think what's more likely to happen is that based on the topography, there seems to be a split in the topography, and I think the way this is written up by the city engineer is that there's a potential different assessment district for sanitary sewer sort of in the north part of that plat, and these homes adjacent to this intersection would still tie into the same way they tie in now.
Yeah, it's just south of the special assessment district.
That's right.
according to the information we gave in the packet.
That's right. And as far as if a future main extension would replace the easement, I'm not sure. For purposes of this ordinance, either easement or right-of-way is sufficient as long as there's a sanitary line to connect to.
In order to get that special assessment district approved, is that up to the residents' vote, which they said was close before, or is that at some point become a public health concern? Because there's a lot of septic systems up in there that are failing, and some have been replaced with raised septic systems that don't
Sure.
last all that long either. At some point, does the city or Kent County Health Department have a say in whether that district is implemented or not, and they go ahead and put the sewer in?
There's always the opportunity to have that discussion at a high level about public health and safety issues, where we have, in other parts of Walker, the issue is more that the groundwater is not sufficient, or there need to be updates to wells that are used, or where public water might be more of a health concern. It's a discussion that's worth having, but I think the main mechanism that's been tried in the past is whether the special assessment district can get the votes it needs to move forward and get done.
Well, there's nothing that you want in place that would override the residents if it becomes a health issue for the area?
I don't know that there's nothing in place. I think there's always a possibility, but I think in the past we've used special assessment in something that requires buy-in from the neighborhood to extend public utilities into places. So it's a worthy conversation to have.
So I have a question.
Yep.
Are the neighbors who are concerned about the possibility of their septic system failing in the future, is it a raised mount system, or is it a typical, regular septic system that they have?
That's a good question. I think a lot of these are raised mound systems that are having problems.
Yeah,
I'm not sure what the individuals,
I think they have both types in the area, I think.
yeah, 'cause I was more
I
interested in
think
what the
the
neighbors
original
have.
ones were standard septic fields, septic systems. When those fail,
Right.
then they put in the raised ones, which don't last as long even
Right.
as the first one installed. So at some point, when even the raised ones start to fail, and the existing ones continue to fail, that was my question, is at what point does the
Right.
county step in and say, the land will no longer take this drainage?
Well, the above ground is, look, correct me, isn't that aeration? Is that the philosophy in the above ground system is for aeration purposes, instead of all
Kinda-
going underground?
kind of wishing I went and grabbed the city engineer and made him come to the meeting, because I'm a little outside of my lane, but I think that sounds right.
I know years and years ago, that's what was explained to us, that, you know, it's a certain percent above ground systems are meant to be for aeration to a point, okay? That takes the burden off the soil. The way I understood it anyway, that's why they want it on top of the ground.
This talks about it being a temporary, or if I look at Scott's letter, would this lateral hookup be with the city of Grand Rapids, or is that different from what a future sanitary plan would look like?
Let's see, where are you seeing?
Page 12, right in the middle.
potentially and temporarily served by public sanitary
And
sewer.
then lots further north should be served from the north via the sanitary sewer vision.
That's a good question. Maybe that speaks to Roger's point about whether the easement would be replaced by an actual main extension at some point. If it's talking about,
But they would have to create another or a district for that? Is that what we're talking about? Or apply for that? For that to happen?
Maybe we could bring up that map that had the lots and the lines.
if the chair would want to look at the report from the city engineer, I can do that.
Okay.
I'll have this link quite ready. Look away from the screen, everyone.
Getting dizzy here.
Okay. So there's your proposed 8-inch sewer, and that would actually, you can see the Alpine Township limits. So I believe this would be part of the North Kent system. I think it may be mentioned somewhere in there. Potentially and temporarily, yeah, and I'm not sure what the temporarily is referring to there. But I think between the purview of our engineering department and the city of Grand Rapids, the permit would be intended to connect to that sanitary, and there would be no justification for reverting back to some kind of a septic field if there's public sanitary available. We've also heard from the health department that percolation tests for septic are not working, they're failing. And so, there's hurdles that would have to be jumped through to peel away from this sanitary sewer service to that property that I think multiple agencies would have firewalls against.
May I speak to that, or I believe it's addressed in the report as well?
Sure. Step to the microphone, please.
I believe what the intention is it's now a parallel hookup. They prefer it to be lateral, and if there's a system put in later that is approved, there's a mechanism for, they're going to charge now for hooking in, but they're going to possibly reimburse the charge of hooking in now if they do the lateral hook in later, or come up with some configuration for the investment that's going in now. But they probably will, if they did put in a system, make it a system-wide and much more, there's a word for it, but everything worked all enveloped appropriately together. And I believe that's in the report on page 12 of the latter report. It's a very good question, though. And if they did get the approval for that special assessment district, then that's, I think, how they would handle it.
Right, thank you. Any other comments or questions on it? From the board?
I know the public comment time has been closed, but for listening to your discussion about the sewer system and septic, I think I may have some information that may be.
Well, you can step forward to the board, just that we closed the hearing on it, whatever. We'll take the input.
Thank you, I appreciate that. The discussion of a regular common septic system versus a raised mound system, I can speak to this because I have it at my own house. At one point, actually right when I was buying my home in the year 2000, the septic system failed upon inspection. And so a raised mound system had to be installed. It entailed putting in a new tank with a very powerful pump, a lift pump, and then some distance away, it put in proper soil and so on, so that is lifted up into that, and aeration is one of the main mechanisms for that. But what that requires is space. You have to be a certain distance from your old drain field, and you have to be, have proper soil. And the Kane's lot is quite small. And so their concern, one, is if there's going to be an easement currently, and Victoria Kane discussed her frustration with this, if the street's going to be opened up and pipes are going to be laid in order to take that short distance to hook into the city sewer system, it would seem to make sense at the same time, and from a cost perspective, I mean, that could be shared, and let both those properties hook up, and it would lessen the load on already overtaxed septic systems throughout the area. And so I don't know if the city's engineering department ever engages in discussions of this nature. But if the city can have any input on that decision that apparently now rests with the Grand Rapids water system and sewer system, it would seem to be a common sense matter of if we're going to extend it to one extra house, do one more, and it would solve problems for the foreseeable future and lessen that sense of urgency. But in terms of the raised system, yes, that's what you do when your system fails, but you need a lot of space to do it, and they're limited as to that space, and that's why they also requested, if possible, that the well be moved to the other side, the proposed well be moved to the other side of the lot, so that if a raised system does need to go into that adjacent property, the Kane's property, that mound, they would have as much flexibility as possible on the location of that. So thank you very much for taking that further input. I appreciate it.
Thank you. But I don't know how that operates. I know most of the time, if you're gonna have multiple hookups or whatever, we gotta have a regular district developed, don't we? I mean, that's the way it's always been done in the past. And I think that would have to be petitioned by the property owners, wouldn't it? By the city of Grand Rapids and the city of Walker. I assume that's the way the process would have to go. I don't know.
Well, there's a conceptual map of one way that process could unfold for those remaining neighbors on the screen here, and I think there's a number of ways that could work. The issue for this case is whether there's a feasible way to get the easement in place to serve this lot that's not built on yet.
Right.
And then whether there can be a permit approved for that sanitary line to go in, which would have to be done before they can build a house there.
Right.
So that's something that'll be up to the city of Grand Rapids.
Right.
Did you say that the red line was the North Kent district?
I believe that's what I thought
Because
we're tying in.
would the city of Grand Rapids not have enough capacity in that sense to allow all those houses to come down on them, which is why they're not wanting to extend it further than just the one house?
I believe that's part of the justification for why they were isolating that group. But
And I'm sorry to keep walking up here. If you look at that map, the Kane's property is at the highest point. So everything runs downhill from there. And I think that helps explain when you see the red line coming up, it's actually coming up a hill. The Kane's property is the highest point. The cistern that was on this property was there because it was the highest point and it served the golf course and so on. So it makes sense for sewer pipes to run downhill, and I think that's a natural point of demarcation going, almost like, certain watersheds. From the highest point, the red line runs downhill, and I believe that's likely one of the reasons why is that it's part of the York Creek watershed as opposed to the green line, which would be in Grand Rapids, so.
Okay. It's still gonna have to go through, no matter what would go, would have to go through city engineering, Grand Rapids engineering, and we don't know anything about that, and that'd have to be petitioned for, I would think, and then go from there. As far as expense sharing and whatever, all that has to be resolved, and I don't think that this board is ready to handle any of that, so. Property owner, I mean, they have the option to do what they want to do, I guess. So basically, we have a petition from the property attorney to withdraw the request. And we don't have a easement in hand, so to speak, yet, do we, Dan?
We don't. We have a instrument number, a receipt, unless there's a new,
I have an unrecorded version of what was recorded. It's signed.
we do have the executed easement in hand. Which is
Yes,
probably
yes.
That's what we have up here as well.
Yes, okay,
Okay.
okay,
It's just, we won't provide the recording.
sure,
Sorry, that was superfluous.
okay, yeah, okay. So if we
I
make,
think that the
if we
idea
make a
is-
motion or take, or grant this withdrawal to a point, we can table it until you have,
The direction I've been given is that there is a stated, let me make sure I read this right, but there is a submittal of proof of compliance with the code, which is basically submittal of an easement that shows the connection being imminent to the sanitary sewer system. Even after the hearing, the applicant can state that they're willing to withdraw their application for variance from sanitary service because they're saying they will provide sanitary service. So the ZBA right now can adopt a motion to receive the oral withdrawal
okay,
and close out the case.
okay?
So that is the last couple of pages in your update packet.
Yep,
So the first of the last pages, it looks like this, is what that motion looks like. And I do see that I put a finding of fact related to the applicant providing a copy of the sanitary easement. You might just say will instead of has. In other words, the applicant will provide a copy of recorded sanitary easement which substantiates compliance with that code.
okay. We got that? Okay. All right, that's kind of where we're at right now, board. Anybody have any more questions or comments? So what are we thinking? Anybody care to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we receive and file a request by the applicants to withdraw their variance request, and that the applicant will provide a copy of the recorded sanitary sewer easement, which substitutes the compliance with section 94, 169.
Support.
Motion and a support. Any comments or additions or deletions on the motion before I call for a vote? signify by saying aye. Favor. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Pose same sign. All right, the motion has carried, and we need a signature, sir, right here. Roger, it's right, sure, right here.
Because,
Yeah, right here, Roger, right here in the straight, sure, yeah, yeah.
yeah, I guess that doesn't hurt. Signature.
Everybody understood what the motion was, right? So, okay, cool.
Touched it, thanks.
Okay. Applicant for Profile Film Properties LLC present? Okay. I'll run down through this a minute. We'll get to you, okay? Okay, all right. Okay. Applicant owner of Profile Film Properties LLC is requesting to add 2 or 3 silos here? 2?
2 at this time. They,
2 silos,
there were
okay.
3 shown, and we understand there's not going to be another one for over a year, so that would trigger
Okay.
a different request.
Okay, 63-foot silos at the south end of the building to process material storage. This is contrary to the section 94-188 of the Walker zoning ordinance, which limits maximum heights in the MH heavy industrial zone district to 45 feet. The subject property is located at 1976 Avastar Parkway, Northwest. I have attached application materials, site imagery, and a model motion to this review package, along with attachments which highlight aspects of my analysis of the 4-dimensional variance criteria. That was from Dan, okay? Okay, under exceptional or extraordinary circumstances that are exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions applying to properties in question as to intended use of the property that do not apply generally to other properties in the same zoning district. Applicant's response: due to the increased demand and growth profile requires additional storage ability to sustain increased processing operations. The existing facility, as noted in previous variances review, is unique industrial structure that warrants additional storage when running at a full capacity. Preservation of rights, that such a variance is necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of a substantial property right similar to that possessed by other properties in the same zoning district and in the vicinity. The possibility of increased financial return shall not in itself be deemed significant to warrant the variance. Applicant's response: as noted in the previous request and analysis, the variance that was granted in 2014 by the Zoning Board of Appeals originally authorized up to 9 63-foot tall silos. The original 5 were constructed in 2014, and a 6 approved in 2017. 3, authorizing such a variance will not be substantial detriment to the adjacent property and will materially impair the intent and purposes of this chapter of the public interest. I should say not will not. Okay. Applicant's response: the existing building is 53 feet high. The existing facility and the areas are industrial and already have structures that extend above the 45-foot limit per the ordinance. Four, not a general problem, the condition or situations of the piece of property or the intent of use of such property for which the variance is sought is not so general of recurrent of nature as to make reasonably practicable the formulation of a general regulation for such a condition or situation. Applicant's response, the building is near other structures that are already higher than the 45 feet limit and is not located near an airport. Anyway, on the, we had some changes a little bit on this site, Dan?
Just a few updates in your packet. I had
Okay.
originally requested a condition related to having these silos be set back equal the distance equal to their height from the property line. When I heard more detail from the applicant that that was not going to be possible with their layout, I just asked for some supplemental information that kind of justified why they're proposing them where they are. And so my packet was kind of adjusted to reflect that. And there's a new letter dated today from the applicant. And there's also a slightly revised motion. So that's what you have in this update packet that was at your spot. Otherwise, everything's the same as it was before. So if you want me to, I can run through a couple of background slides too.
Sure.
Okay, so the context of the site is such that you might know the old Lear plant. This is where a few industrial tenants moved in where there had been the GM Lear facility.
Yep.
Profile Films, their business was explained in their application. And you know what, if anybody would like me to, I can shut the door if we're having trouble, or we might be clearing out.
I'm not having any trouble. You want the door shut? You guys
good?
okay with it? With the
Okay.
noise?
All right, I'll keep
Okay.
going then.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so the site is over here at the old Lear plant off of Avastar Parkway. Here's the request. There have been 6 silos approved in the past. Here's the proposed layout of the next 2 and then the future 1. I did ask for consideration of an alternate location that was a little farther set back from that lot line. Operationally, that is not preferred because of the blocking the loading docks.
Okay.
So here's what the silos look like. They're industrial structures for storage. That's basically like a grain structure on an agricultural property, except that it's an industrial site with its own sort of function. The update was to, of course, get some more information about the setback from the lot line. They're set back about 53 feet from the lot line, which this is all sort of part of the same aspect of the request related to the height. So you typically want to have your building, at least your principal building on an industrial site, set back a distance equal to the height of the structure. In this case, they'll be encroaching a little bit on that setback distance because these are 63-foot structures, 53-foot setback. Just one more bit about the context, just to show the fact that this site is far removed from any residences, so you're not really having an overbearing industrial structure encroaching on a home site. You can see most of the platted homes are pretty far away, over a quarter mile away. So when you think about the 4-dimensional variance criteria, of course, there's the exceptional or extraordinary circumstances one. You might think about the uniqueness of the surrounding land. This is a very industrial context. This is a uniquely large site, about 34 acres. So those are kind of unique aspects of the property that I think are valid for this request. When you think about the preservation of rights criterion, in some ways this one's a slam dunk because you have the right was already granted to this very property for the same thing. There's also the Grand Valley Concrete case from 2015 that has its own concrete storage needs. Similar variance was granted for that. The no detriment criterion, the one thing I got hung up a little bit on is just making sure that there's still adequate room around these structures, an adequate fall zone if there was ever an event where one of these fell, and adequate assurance of fire safety. So like with the other structures, we'll recommend that there's a fire department review. There's some comments way back from 2014 that the fire official at that time was comfortable with the way it was constructed. We want to continue to have their ability to have input over these. make sure there's still a maneuvering aisle of 26-foot width around them. And then, of course, the fall zone, there would be a 10-foot encroachment over the property line if there was ever an event where it fell, but there's no structure at that location.
Okay.
And I think there's some background material submitted that shows this will have structural integrity to support it.
Yeah.
The uniqueness of this request, this is a unique type of industrial structure. I don't think there's a reason to go back and say we don't want to have this as a variance. We want to have it as a general ordinance. That wouldn't really be appropriate here. So
Right.
I think all of those 4 criteria have been met, conditioned on knowing that we can't get this setback equal to the distance of the height of the building. There should still be a 26-foot wide access aisle. The drawing should demonstrate adequate wind loading and assurance against fall zone over adjacent structures. And that being said, I'm comfortable with a conditional approval for this one. But
Okay.
I'll leave it up to you.
All right, now you can step forward to the microphone, I'm sure, Leslie. You have anything you'd like to add, okay, at this time? Is she, is the lady back there with you?
Yes.
Would you like to speak to this variance? Me? Yeah. Sure. Okay,
You don't need to.
yeah, we can open the hearing up. Yep. Roger makes the motion. Supported by Pat. All in favor of opening hearing up, signify by saying aye. Pose same sign, the hearing is now open. If you'd like to make a comment, you can do that too, after she gets done with her,
Sure. We're from the same office,
presentation. Huh?
so we're from the same office. We're both with Metric Structures representing
Okay, so
Profile
you're
Films.
kind of together, right?
Yes.
Is that what you are? Okay, that's what I wanted
Yep.
to know. But if you want to add anything, just let me know, okay? All right, okay. Okay,
My name is
go
Alicia
ahead.
Vander Ark. I'm with Metric Structures representing Profile Films as a contractor. I think Dan did a really great job of explaining what we're trying to achieve tonight. But the only thing that I would add is that these structures are fully engineered, both structurally, civil engineering, both the sort of pre-manufactured structure itself, as well as the foundations and soils. So they are fully engineered structures.
Okay.
Do you have any other questions that I can
Well,
answer?
maybe, I don't know if we got any more of it. I'll entertain them. Well, I think we could probably close the hearing again now, can't we? And turn it over to the board for question and review or not?
Yeah, ask if there's any other public comments.
I
It looks
did.
like there probably wouldn't be.
I did. I did. Okay,
Motion to close the meeting.
all right. Motion by closing the hearing, hear support,
Hearing.
or hearing?
Support.
Okay, supported by Rose. All those in favor of the motion to close the hearing, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Pose same sign. It is now closed. Now we'll turn it over to the board for questions and
I've got
reviews.
a question. You're requesting 2 additional silos at this time. The third is going to come within probably a year.
The estimate would be more than a year, and that is why we reduced it from 3 to 2, because the approval would expire after a year. And that was sort of the predicament we got into in 2014. We applied for all 9, and they were approved. And then in the meantime, as that has expired, but the need for the additional storage silos wasn't there. So we came back again in 2017, I believe, and added the additional, and now we're coming back for 2 more of those 9, so we would end up at 8. And then there would be the 1 additional that was approved in 2014 that we don't need at this time.
I guess what I'm getting at is if you're going to pour foundations for 2, would you pour the 3rd foundation at this time?
No. We would, it's a,
Is the future one going to be proposed to be in line with these 2?
it is at this time. The investment is fairly significant for these foundations. It's about 6 feet of solid concrete.
Or is it like a block?
I would have to double check with the foundation drawings, but there's probably a separation in terms of a joint there between each pad, if I had to guess.
Anyone else?
Dan, back in 17, we approved a sixth one. It says here it's approved.
Yeah.
Was it ever installed?
Yeah, I think it's the
I noticed on,
rightmost front one on that. And then I think the image on the screen on that first slide may have predated that sixth.
okay, yeah, and I had kind of a dotted line there showing that. Okay. And the material stored in these silos, is it all pretty much the same or different materials?
So Profile Films is a plastic manufacturer, and so it's all components of those plastics. I can't guarantee that each one has the identical material in it, but it would all be along the same lines of the plastic material that they use to manufacture their products.
Thank you. Yeah, like beads and whatever, small, yeah, right, all right. Okay. What's the board's pleasure? And we have that recommendation. We probably need to make part of that motion, Dan, as far as the spacing and whatever. Somebody makes the motion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I make a motion to approve the request by the applicant as it's written there, and that all 4 criteria have been met: exceptional and extraordinary circumstances, given the unique site, preservation of rights based on the ZBA decisions in the past, no detriment given the surrounding property and the industrial site overall, and not a general problem. We have one condition as written here in the letter on November the 12th by our planning director, zoning director. Let's see here. How should I best summarize your condition or the one?
Yeah, I think if you want
Fire
to
department?
accept.
Fire
Yeah, Fire
department.
department, 26-foot wide aisle and
Yeah.
verification of structural engineering on the silo are basically my 3 recommended conditions. So you could just
Sure.
refer to planning director's recommended conditions if you want to.
Yeah, we'll include the planning director's recommended conditions.
Okay. Board Member Roger. Any additions or questions on the motion before I call for a vote? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion is granted, approved. I need a signature here, Roger, in a striped shirt right here on the end. Thank you. Bet. Have a good evening. Okay. Anything you want to tell us for the future here, Dan?
Sure, I can tell you something. We have a new staff member with us tonight. Laura Lundy is our new planning assistant, CDD
Okay.
specialist. She comes from working in the development center in the city of Grand Rapids, and she
Cool.
is hitting the ground running and taking everything in stride. So
Good.
Laura may not be attending every zoning board meeting, but we thought we'd want to have her get acquainted with you all for the ones she does attend. So you can also see her at the front desk. Laura and Sherry Wears-Bicky, I don't know if you've met Sherry, but there are sort of co-equal CDD specialist planning assistants up front. So our structure has changed a little bit over the years, but that'll be a great help to have Laura. Otherwise, there is currently no meeting scheduled for the day before Thanksgiving, because I'm not evil, and there's no meeting scheduled for December 11th because we don't have any cases as of right now. But I'll let you know if anything changes there.
Okay,
Could be done for the year.
Could be, that's right, yeah, also no meetings on December 25th.
happy holidays, right?
What about the public safety? Do we have a public safety meeting?
I'm sorry, thank you, Tom, that's a good point.
Yeah, that's
I
next
did invite
week.
you to a joint training with the Police Department for Public Safety, that's December 4th at 5:30.
Here?
Yep,
In this, right, in this one, right?
that's right in this room, yeah.
Okay,
And then the city commission meeting is after that, or the
Planning
Planning
Commission.
Commission.
is immediately.
okay,
That's right, and let me back up, next Wednesday, there's an open house for our 2040 master plan, so that's more of an open format, of course, 5 to 7 PM next Wednesday. You're all invited to attend that, and the draft document is up on the agenda page on our website.
Okay.
We'll probably send the link out to everybody tomorrow, so you can start to review it.
Okay.
So open house on the 20th, public safety training on the 4th, and then,
Okay.
that might be it for the year.
All righty. Somebody want to make a motion to adjourn? All right,
Support.
Roger makes a motion, Thomas, support. All in favor of adjourning, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, we are adjourned. Thank all of you. Good job.